All right, that is a track called From the Surface from a brand new album by Brendan Byrnes. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us again. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so if you didn't get to catch the last interview or two that we did with Brendan, we went over his whole microtonal guitar landscape. Brendan, I know you've got some instruments behind you. You mind if we just
Yeah.
kick this off with an
Yeah.
instrument? Show what you're doing and talk about this new record.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't turn my amp on yet. Do you want me to
No, just show them. I think
just
that's
show? Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. What instrument that was 22 Ito. So 1 second. So that song that you just heard. Actually, I don't even know if I showed this guitar last time, but yeah, this is 22 equal divisions per octave. So you can probably hear this, but sorry, I'm holding it weird, but you get the idea. 22 notes before you reach the octave, and the reason I chose this is because it approximates some notes in the harmonic series that are quote unquote in tune. I mean, they're sort of, if you look at the physics, they are in tune because it's a very simple ratio. But there are notes that kind of fall in between the cracks. They don't really exist in the 12-note Western tuning system. So it has some of those notes, and it also approximates some chords that are a little bit more familiar sounding. But it's bizarro land. It's really weird. Weird scales, weird. If you try to play a chord progression that's familiar, it doesn't really work. So it's yeah.
Well, one of the reasons why I love you and your music and what you do is whenever I've heard microtonal music before I heard you, it was like ugly music for the sake of it. And you are incorporating this very odd sound into, 4/4 time. That in fact, a lot of this album sounds kind of like you could be at a Hawaiian tiki bar. And
Yeah.
I feel like this album is a very dreamy, like a very sort of semi-conscious state. And I listened to it the first time before the Bandcamp page was up, and it really just had this very dreamy and travel kind of effect. And then I read on your Bandcamp page, how the album was done, including astral projections. You want to
Yeah.
you want to just go through like this album, the concept behind
Sure.
it? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the astral projection thing, I mean, I'm not that into like that much like dream analysis or like woo-woo stuff, but like in my 20s, I learned about astral projection. I read about it somewhere, and I was like, that sounds amazing. I want to try it. And I think I got a book or two, and there was like instructions like, this is how you have to train yourself. You have to keep a dream journal. There was this weird thing where you have to tie a string above your bed at night because there's this thing where you like pull yourself out of your body. I don't know. It actually worked because I did astral project whatever's happening. I don't know. It just seems like it's a weird overlap between being awake and asleep. It's some sort of dream state where you're a little bit more conscious, but not unlike a lucid dream. But it felt very physical and real. Like I was catapulted into this world with strange plants, and the ground was breathing. And I mean, it gets into me like, when somebody's telling you about their dream, you're just like, like I don't get it. But suffice to say, that imagery and that feeling, it's always, I always think about it because it was so cool and so fun. And it was, I think when I started making some of this stuff, it felt like that, it felt like that experience. It seemed to sort of line up. So I leaned into that. And I was kind of subconsciously thinking about that and creating that sort of vibe. So, and then I've also had these reoccurring dreams for the last several years. I kind of used that material in my album Holocene Dream. Like there's this house that I always go back to. It's by the ocean. I don't really know what any of the symbolism is, but it has a feeling and a strong pull for me for whatever reason. So that's sort of subconsciously working, underneath the surface on this.
Obviously, this is not a discussion about dreams, nor is the channel focused on this, but I have a place that I go to in my dreams, and
Oh, really?
it's the map doesn't change. It's very
Yes,
strange.
exactly.
And I
Yeah.
have certain feelings there too. I've never thought about music because most of the time when I'm there, I am trying to run. I'm either in a car driving through a
Yeah.
city or I'm trying to run and my legs don't work. And so I feel like
Yeah.
just constant frustration, but I keep returning to this place. And it's funny that you mention all of this because this album just has such a dreamy state. Now, I know you can do that with guitar and reverb and particular sounds, but I think some of the stuff that you're doing with the microtonal chords has a lot to do with it. And even watching, you've been pretty busy on TikTok lately with some very
Yeah.
spiky intervals. But what is,
Yeah.
like, how are you capturing this? And tell us about the improvisational nature of this record and how it differs
Yeah.
from your previous records with vocals and all that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, to your first point about the chords, yeah. I mean, there's something about microtonal chords, like when it clicks for me, like, a lot of times it's just too dissonant for my tastes, but when you find those ones that there's a consonance in there and sort of a new color and a new feeling, they do often evoke kind of like the stuff I was talking about, that dream state sort of feeling and whatever it is that, is in the recurring dreams and astral projection experiences I had. So yeah, leaning into those, definitely helped sort of create that feeling for me. So I'm glad it translates. The improvisation thing, a huge influence on this record was Miles Davis's like late 60s, early 70s period, like In a Silent Way. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. Actually, in that last track we just played, I feel like there's a pretty heavy nod to one of those tracks. Just that mood, it sort of feels very similar to me. And Bitches Brew. So I was listening to those records a lot when I was making this, and this is like something that I've been thinking of and working towards for a long time, but just getting out of how do I get out of, being basically like a bedroom composer and making music? How do I get recordings where I'm capturing lightning in a bottle versus meticulously crafting a recording? And so much of the magic of those Miles Davis records and all improvised music is just something happens that was not planned or not fully thought out, and there's a looseness to it and imperfection and all of that. So I really wanted to go after this album in that manner, like rather than the usual manner. What I've done is like come up with a cool chord progression, figure out some melodic content that I think is strong enough, and build it out. So this one, I would really most of the songs I would start with just percussion. I would just jam on like a ride cymbal and a hi-hat and sort of keep a form in my head, playing musically and trying to, have peaks and valleys, and then just build on that and like grab the guitar, play some ideas. Okay, that works. Track it, move on to the next thing, and not overthink and not worry about form, not worry if something was going to work or not, and then go back and rather than trying to make parts work with editing, I would try to make it work with another part as if you were playing with somebody else in the room. It's like, okay, that person's doing that thing that maybe I don't quite understand what to do, play over that yet, but try to find something that fit. So that was my method of sort of, it's not improvised music, but hopefully it has that feel and trying to capture something that happened rather than build something, piece by piece, if that makes sense.
It does. There are moments on this album where it sounds like you might be using a fretless guitar too. Is that the case?
No, yeah, I used to have a fretless. I don't anymore. So it's all the microtonal guitars. I have the one I just showed you, the 27 equal guitar. This one can probably more often sound like fretless because there's more frets than the last one. Sorry, the fretboard's really dirty. Somebody called me out on YouTube for like, dude, clean your guitar. But yeah, no fretless. Oops. Yeah, no fretless.
That's surprising because there's some, maybe you're just bending or something like that, but there are some notes where I was like,
maybe.
Oh, I wonder if he's venturing into that world. Like, have you played fretless guitar?
Yeah, I mean, a long time ago, I was in my early 20s. I like popped frets off of a guitar I had and filled it in and sanded it, and it was kind of a makeshift fretless. But I was playing it quite a bit. I never got very good at it, but yeah, I have played it.
I think your previous albums are much more poppy with
Yeah.
microtonality. This one, it feels more like Frank Zappa, kind of like almost like Uncle Meat, not sound collage, but more
Hmm.
like you said, free form or songs that don't have as much structure.
Yeah.
They do have structure, but it's more like the structure is the vibe or something. Like,
Yeah.
were you literally just going piece by piece? Like, okay, because there's not a lot of like returning or harkening back to.
Repetition.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wanted to keep it basically like a jam. Like I've done a lot of improvisation with various groups, and I've had a couple of musicians in my life who, whenever we hang out, we just improvise. I've gone through periods in my life where like that's pretty much all I'm doing is just improv. So it's familiar territory to me, and
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't try to have any repetition. I didn't go like, oh, this is a great chorus or something. It's very just linear through composed, because I wanted it to feel sort of like a dream and a jam. You know, those kind of feel the same.
Well, this next track I want to play is called Rock Fever, and I believe
Oh,
I would call this one the strangest one on the whole album. You want to
oh,
set it up?
interesting. Sure. Yeah. Well, this is one of the ones. So there's actually three songs on this album that are a little bit more composed. So Rock Fever is one. So there's more repetition in this. There is kind of a verse chorus thing happening. But yeah, the harmonies are probably maybe a little bit more spicy than the other ones. Um, yeah, Rock Fever. My wife came up with the title, which I thought was great. But yeah, I tried to make the chorus kind of catchy. The verse is, very dreamy, but it's a lot of cluster chords in there. You'll hear these, the chord happens and there's like this almost like harp like effect, and that's me tracking one note at a time. So it's these big cluster chords that I wouldn't be able to play on a guitar, but it's just it's built out note by note. So you'll hear those.
Very interesting, and the guitars sound so good on this record. I just want to say, like,
Oh,
you've
thank
got
you.
that like sort of acoustic, almost like Pat Metheny. He's got the microphone in an electric jazz box, but so you get the microphonic sound plus the amplified sound. Like, I just think
Yeah.
the album sounds great. So nice job with that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah.
Rock Fever. Here we go. Okay, there's really no fretless guitar on that.
No fretless.
Because like
Yeah,
I don't know if there's more frets because when you're sliding down, it sounds less jagged.
You
or
can't hear
something.
the steps. Yeah.
Yeah. But man, it sounds like a fretless guitar. But it's some of those melodies and chords are just wild. What about the bass? Is that what's going on there? Because it sounds like I can't tell if it's a normal 12
Normal bass.
Yeah,
No, I have a 22 Ito bass. Do you want to see it?
of course you do. Yeah, please pull it out.
Oh, whoops. I just hit my cloud up there. Yeah, 22 Ito bass.
Of course.
So I got this. I had a band that played in 22 Ito, and I had a bass player who was like willing to give it a shot. And he's like, "Well, I don't have a 22 Ito bass," so I bought it, for the band basically, knowing that I'd hopefully use it for the rest of my life, and I have so far. So yeah, same setup as the other one, 22 notes per octave. But yeah, I'm playing bass on the 27 Ito tracks with that guitar, but when I do that, I just run it through a little alter boy, which just pitches it down an octave. I do a little filtering just to make it sound like a bass. But any song that's in 22 Ito, I use this. So yeah, the bass line kind of drives that track, or at least the chorus. So
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't tell. Like, what about the steel drums? Is that keyboard?
Oh,
like you did
yeah,
last
that's a virtual instrument. It's just a steel drum Native Instruments patch that I retuned to 22 Ito. Throw some delay on it, and it's just playing all of the behind the guitar parts, so it's added texture.
Okay, so I forget which interview it was, but we talked a bit about our wives, and your wife, her thoughts on this music, just kind of like, that's nice, What about this one?
This is her favorite. So when I first met my wife, I played her my music, and so thankfully we made it to the next date. But I think one of the reasons why she couldn't get into it was she doesn't really like synthesizers or things that aren't so organic. She likes organic stuff. She likes folk and, Neil Young and Tom Petty and stuff like that. So, and I love that stuff too. But yeah, she couldn't get behind the synthesizers. So she's always just like, yeah, I like this, but maybe like lose the synth or like try something more organic. So this is definitely like my most organic album, and she really digs it. And I think she's accustomed to microtones now. She doesn't think it's all that weird anymore. So, I mean, because she hears me making it all the time.
Yeah, I was wondering that about myself. Like, there are definitely some really like pushy moments throughout the album, but for the most part, I was like, okay, yeah, this doesn't feel as woozy as the previous ones. Is that me acclimating, or were you making an intentional choice on this?
I've never intentionally tried to make it like more microtonal or less microtonal, but I think the nature of like what I was trying to do, with all the dream like stuff we were talking about before, making it dreamy, and also like you mentioned, like it feels like you're at a tiki bar. Like there's definitely like some exotica influences and just jazz that's more mellow in a silent way. Like all of that stuff, I feel like in a silent way, I think is a good example, because there's some really kind of crazy harmonies, but the way it's presented doesn't come across as this intense dissonance, So I think that's probably a big part of it. But I know you've probably heard a lot of microtonal music, if you've listened to my stuff more, so you might be acclimating.
Yeah, that's for sure. What is that Strat neck behind you? Over your left shoulder, that one, yeah.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, what's going on there?
I feel like I might have showed you this guitar before. I don't know.
I think you did, but what is happening?
Yeah.
Like what's with all the smaller spaces?
Yeah, here. I can't plug it in if you want. Actually, I have it set up. But so this is it's made by Freenote, a guy named John Cattler. It's a 12-tone JI plus guitar. So it's a regular fretting. It's a 12 equal fretting, but in between each fret, you have an extra fret that allows you to play simple just intonation ratios. So in other words, you can play a note that approximates the 7th harmonic of the harmonic series, the 11th harmonic, and the 13th harmonic for any string that you're on. So like for example, the fundamental, I'm actually tuned to D, so high D string. This note is a minor third. It's a simple Ji ratio. And then you have this one. I don't know how well that's coming across in the mic.
Yeah, I hear it fine.
You can hear? Oh, okay, cool. For example, that's a minor seventh. That's approximating a 7-4 simple Ji ratio, and then that's the one we're used to. So you can get all these cool chords. Oh, my earphones. So I'm not tuned either, but so here's an example. That's an 11th, 11 to 8. That note's approximating the 11th harmonic.
Now, some guitarists like Matthias Eklund and I think Steve Vai and a few other guys, they have these perfect temperament or true temperament. I can't remember what it's called.
True temperament.
Like all the wobbly frets.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like the true temperament of 22 EDO or something?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that would work, but yeah, you could. I feel like the true temperament thing, I could be wrong, but isn't it sort of, it's like they're doing that because of the way guitar necks are structured.
Yeah.
And like they're kind of like stretching an octave and reducing inharmonicity and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Almost like you have to tune a piano a little bit sharp just so the octaves sort of feel right, even though things are stretched. So yeah, that would probably come in useful for microtonal stuff. There's a lot of microtonal, I shouldn't say a lot, there's a handful of microtonalists out there who really like know the stuff at a deep level that I just don't understand. And I've heard the recommendation a couple times for 27 Edo. Apparently if you compress 27 Edo by like 4 cents, it suddenly becomes like a much more in tune or usable temperament. So there's probably something to explore there. I can't speak that intelligently about it, but there is something to like, stretching and pulling these things so they sound a little bit better, kind of like what the true temperament guitars do.
Okay. So this brand new album, Astral Bloom, it's available on Bandcamp. It just came out, a few days ago, right?
Yeah, on Tuesday. Is
there a physical or is it digital only?
I'm just doing digital only this time around. I'd love to do physical, and I might if the numbers ever work, if I'm selling enough. But I did vinyl on the last one, and still waiting to make up my money on that. So just doing digital.
Yeah, tell us about the trumpet, bass, clarinet, the guest musicians. Fitting that into this music, I love the bass clarinet stuff, and we've featured Nick Birch and his bass clarinetist Shah, and it's such a great sound, and you're using it really all throughout the music. So tell us about these guest musicians.
So the bass clarinetist Michael Mull, he's an amazing musician, plays in a bunch of things in LA, bands and session musician and stuff like that. He's familiar with microtones, but he hadn't played a ton of them, but I knew he was good enough that he could figure it out. So, just brought him over, and I wrote the parts with a MIDI instrument, virtual instrument. So I had the parts where I could just click on the note and it would play it. And so we were able to just sort of walk through, and he could sort of figure out like, okay, how do I tune that note? Okay, how do I tune this note? Sometimes he could get a whole phrase. But we would really just like walk through phrase by phrase, sometimes get recording one note at a time. And especially where there's like long chords and stuff, those were easier to get, but the phrases were a little trickier. But I don't know how he did it. I just know it was difficult for him to figure out how to do it, because those instruments weren't designed to play these notes, so he had to just make it work. And the same goes for Luis Lopez, the trumpet player. I've collaborated with him quite a bit, actually, and it seems like trumpet might be easier to retune. It's still really difficult, and it took a lot of work, but they both sound so great. I feel like they their sound and what they brought to it like kind of defines the album for me. It would be a much different album if the horns weren't in there.
I totally agree. It's got
Yeah.
I think those instruments bring a real vibe to the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's really great. It's kind of like Daniel Lanois' albums where you can listen to it very actively and get a lot out of it, or you can put it on in the background and it kind of like fades away. You don't even realize it's microtonal music or something. And I just really enjoyed this record. It's not particularly weird outside of the microtonal elements, but I just think like it stands on its own in a way that I think your other albums might sound a bit more like, I hate to use the word mainstream or commercial. This one is just kind of like you're just doing this thing and creating this feeling, and so I really enjoyed this record. It's good.
That's awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's. Why don't you cue us up for the last track that we'll listen to, Ravenous Bloom.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to remember. I think it's just trumpet on this track. Yeah, I don't think bass clarinet's on this one. Oh. But yeah, this was another one. It's in 27 equal divisions, the octave. This was one of the ones, like kind of like the first one, where it was very jammy, just kind of recorded and conceptualized on the spot and not a lot of overthinking. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Thanks a lot, Brendan.
Okay.
Really appreciate you joining us again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, here we go. And I didn't want that one to end.